In the last vignettes, we have been discussing the visible signs, the four visible signs of the Catholic Church, and we mentioned the fact that these four are more visible than the previous ones we had been discussing. The previous ones are quite difficult to detect, while these four visible signs are easier to detect. Even unbelievers can detect these four signs. And Christ made it in such a way that if you believe these four visible signs and have faith in the church because you have seen the four visible signs, then the other signs are revealed to you. And therefore, as you see more and more signs that the Catholic Church is truly the Church of Christ, then your faith begins to develop with some degree of certitude. You become surer and surer that you are in the right path. The four visible signs that we have seen are 1, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. We have finished discussing the first one, which is that the Catholic Church is one. Meaning to say, if you go to all the nations, whether Africa, America, Canada, or whatsoever, the Catholic Church is exactly the same in all these parts of the world. At the beginning, it can be really said that the Church of Christ was one, united. But then heresies began to spring, and those who left the Catholic Church became fragmented into 1,000 parts. And the reason behind it is that they lost what makes the church one or united. In the sense that what makes us one is that our doctrines are one, taken from the fathers of the church. But the moment you set aside tradition or the writings of the fathers, you are guided more by your personal opinions, and therefore the grave danger of being fragmented. What has happened to those who have left the church is that they organize themselves into denominations, but the moment one preacher would dislike the teachings of that denomination, he would cut himself out from it and begin to start a new fragment of that denomination. And so there seems to be no end to the fragmentation of those religions or sects that has left the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church can truly be one because it is a corporate organization. And that corporate organization is very visible to everybody. Meaning to say, the Catholic Church looks very much like a well-organized corporation with a head that is seated at Rome. And it seems that all these other churches, local and national churches, are well organized to the point that this one giant corporate company seems to be functioning so smoothly. And this smooth functioning of the Catholic Church has been the envy of everyone. There were times in the history of the Catholic Church where Catholic nations were at war. For instance, Catholic England was at war with Catholic France during the time of St. Joan of Arc. They were fighting, and there were so many betrayals and political intrigues. But mind you, they were still united in doctrine. Both of them were believers of the papacy, infallibility of the Pope, the seven sacraments, and the Holy Eucharist, and so on. So in other words, even if they were at war, they were united, well, in some sense. Because you see, the signs of the Catholic Church, one holy Catholic and apostolic, doesn't have to appear in an eminent way. It must appear only a little. You cannot see it a little, but you can see it a little, because that is the very essence of faith. If the four signs of the Catholic Church are so blatant, then you don't need faith in order to submit to the Church. But precisely because it is in some degree blurred, requires from us an act of faith to submit to her. The next sign, visible sign of the Catholic Church, is that it is holy. And we mentioned the fact that this holiness are not so much among the members, but in the institution, in the Church as an institution, she is holy. In other words, it's the Church that sanctifies its members, and not so much the members sanctifying the Church by their holiness. It is a pity, though sometimes that sign of oneness is quite evident in the Catholic Church, the next sign, holiness, is not quite evident, in the sense that you hardly hear anybody teaching the commands of Christ, how to observe them, and then gradually guide them to the observance of that command. Like we said before, the Catholic Church can be absorbed wholly, totally by anybody, whatever nationality you are, African, European, so on. And whether you are intelligent or dumb, you can still absorb the totality of the Catholic teaching. Whether you are grown up or a child, whether you are educated or not, whether you are rich or poor, you can absorb the totality of the Catholic teaching without any adjustment. And so it's a very bad tendency for anyone to adjust Catholic teachings to any specific culture, because that will entail some changes in the teachings of Christ, and therefore it would cease to be the Catholic faith. The Catholic Church, too, has that very great privilege of making man feel one. A Catholic German is a Catholic, more of a Catholic than a German. And a Catholic French is more a Catholic than a French. That's the reason why there was a time in Europe where there were no Germans or Portuguese or Spaniards or French. All of them were just Catholics. It is strange, but it is an effect of being a Catholic that when you go around among strangers, total strangers, and suddenly one person says he's Catholic, right away, the strangeness between the two of you is obliterated. Immediately you feel at home. Immediately it seems that you know somebody familiar. Catholicism removes that strangeness that exists and differentiates men from one another, making them totally one. This is the Catholicity of the Catholic Church, which the other denominations do not have. You know, the other denominations are quite exclusive in their viewpoint. Like, for instance, the Lutherans is a religion that is more adapted to Germans. And so the Spaniards doesn't feel at home being Lutheran. The Anglicans are more adapted to the British or to the English. And one who is a Portuguese will not feel at home in being an Anglican. And the same thing within Methodists. The Americans are more at home in being Methodists, but the Italians wouldn't feel at home being Methodists. And yet, if you look all around the world, everybody feels at home with a Catholic Church. This is the Catholicity of the Church. One, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. When is the Catholic Church apostolic, or when is a church that claims to be Christ apostolic? When it is committed to the doctrine that is handed down by the apostles. You see, Christ explained his teaching. The apostles elaborated a little from the teachings of Christ, and they tried to recall what Christ had taught them, which they have not written down. And all of these were gathered together by the so-called Fathers of the Church. To be apostolic, the Church must cling to these doctrines and teachings which the apostles had gathered together and written down by the Fathers of the Church. Now, this is important because Christ says, "As the Father hath sent me, I sent you." And so there must be a succession of people that are sent. It is not enough for us to be called. We also have to be sent. In the Catholic Church, like me, for instance, I'm a priest. But if I sit down, I can trace my priesthood up to the time of the apostles. There is a succession which is unbroken succession of being sent. Peter sent this and so on until my bishop sent me. No other Christian denomination can brag that they were sent. The Anglicans brag that they also have this succession with a person called Bonar. But who sent Bonar? Henry VIII. Is he part of the succession of the hierarchy? Of course not. The only thing he did was he sent his wives to the gallows. But definitely, it has nothing to do with being sent. We must love the oneness, holiness, the apostolicity, and Catholicity of the Catholic Church, because in this way can the Church shine. God bless you.